Means that do it. Burger
Welcome to the 6th episode of Airchecks. I'm your host, Ty Rosenau. One of the best storytellers, Jean Shepherd, is best known for several published books and a little well-known movie in 1980s called A Christmas Story, which gets played in American homes annually around the Christmas season. A Christmas Story is just a compilation of his multiple stories of growing up in Indiana. He also did radio shows. Here's the Jean Shepherd show when Jean gets locked out of his office at WOR, originally broadcasted on April 16th, 1960.
Listen, I want you to very, very carefully follow every word that I am about to utter. And this is serious. This is probably one of the most serious things that's ever happened to this country. And I believe that I am the first man in the eastern section of this United States to have discovered it. It's a terrible plot, an awful thing that's beginning to happen. Now, let me tell you exactly what happened. I come down to the station this morning. Now, the station is a standard, ordinary sort of building. I mean, it's an office building, you know. There are all kinds of accountants, second-rate dentists, guys who do tax returns. There are Christmas tree salesmen, all sorts of ordinary businessmen up and down throughout this entire gigantic honeycomb of a building. It's right here on Broadway, right in the middle of Manhattan, right in the middle of these United States. Stable country. Country that believes in right things, has God on its side. I mean, right? Okay, correct. We know exactly where we are. So I came down here this morning. I am an employee here. I'm a hard-working man. I do exactly what I am paid to do. I am here. I do it. I go through my song and dance. I tap dance. I do my routine. I play my nose flute. I pick up my pittance and I go. I don't bother anybody, right? I have not rubbed anyone's fur the wrong way, correct? Okay, all right. Now, we know where we stand. I come down to this place this morning, And I arrive in front of my office, this little hole in the wall that they have assigned to 2 or 3 of us. And I reach in my pocket and take out the key. I have a key, a regular Yale lock key. You know, the official kind of key that opens apartments on the east side and that. And I go up to this door and I try to put the key in. Nothing happens. I turn it over and I try it again. Nothing happens. So then I take out my other gigantic pile of keys that are all attached to this long chain that keep falling out of my pocket and breaking at the horn and hard art and all that. So one by one, I try each one, knowing full well that none of these are the keys to this door. But a man can't believe such a thing can happen. This is Saturday morning. The sun is shining. There are tourists walking up and down as though nothing is happening right there on Times Square. See, now listen carefully. This has to do with you, not me, you, all of us. And so I'm beginning to work around with this lock, and I suddenly, it dawns on me, I can't get in the office. I'm locked out. I call the air conditioning, the guys who maintain none of them can get in. The doors are all locked. And none of their keys work. This is on Saturday morning in this country, America. I can't get in the office. Everything, all the things I own, all the important things are locked in that office now. My nose flute, my commercials, what else is there in my life? So I come up to the studio here, and all these people here are totally unconcerned, not knowing what is occurring. Now, I'd like to point out just exactly what this means. I have a suspicion that this has happened. It's an awful thought. But do you realize this town is vulnerable? We are wide open on Saturday mornings. All you poor clowns are sitting out in Darien. You poor idiots are sitting on your duffs out there in New Rochelle, not knowing nothing about what's going on in your office on a Saturday morning. And I'm inquiring around here, and I asked the elevator operator, I said, what, was there anybody up here? He says, why, yes, a short, stout man wearing a dark overcoat with a velvet collar appeared, carrying a thin briefcase and a large ring of keys. He left, he said, within 10 minutes. It could very well be possible that this man, this short, stout man, is only one of a large phalanx of short, stout men bearing briefcases who have appeared all over Manhattan. Do you realize what this could do to this country if Monday morning 2.5 million men descend upon Manhattan with the wrong keys? What is the first assumption you make when your key doesn't work in the lock? Of course, you know what the first thing that you think of in this town. You arrive at your office, you try the key, you immediately get in the elevator, go down, and head for the unemployment office. That's all there is to do. Either that or you go right back home on the 1037 and you arrive back in Darien. You go home and you say, I left my keys. Where are my keys? I could see this beautiful scene of the guy arriving home. He says, hey, Mabel, I left my keys, for crying out loud. It's about 11 o'clock now. And his wife says, what do you mean you left your keys? There are no keys here. I must have taken the wrong keys, Mabel. Come on, now give me them keys. Hurry up. I left them on the buffet, for crying out loud. Hurry up. And she goes in and rustles through the buffet. She says, there's a couple of keys to the garage here. He says, well, no, come on, the keys. Give me the keys quick. These keys don't work. These are the only keys you've had, Charles. And then the panic begins to hit Charlie. He sits down and says, why didn't they have the guts to tell me? Why didn't they tell me? Why didn't they tell you? Look, I have a suspicion. What with the abstract life that we're all involved in, the paper life, the life of deep, abject fear that most of us live in, and it's a fear, it's not a fear really of bombs. It's not a fear of the decline of Western civilization. Let me tell you, in spite of what the writers write about, it is not a fear of the great threat of rising imperialism in the East. None of these things bother the average guy. Oh, no. It's the terrible sneaking suspicion that one day they're going to discover what a phonus balonus he really is, and not even with so much as to dignify it. With a pink slip, blue slip, or green slip, they merely just changed the lock. That's all there is to it, and he'll know exactly why they did it. And I fully believe that this country could be invaded, could be disrupted, completely destroyed. For 3 whole days, no one would even find it out, because no one would have the guts to say anything to the next guy. They locked me out of the office. The only thing that would happen would be by Wednesday there would be 17.5 million guys lined up in front of the unemployment office on 42nd Street, all of them pretending that, carrying on with the big front, until somebody by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon would discover that the unemployment guys have been locked out and they are in the line too. And by then, of course, someone would appear on the radio and say, "It's all over. It is all over. We have the keys now." And to the right thinkers in the audience, to the right thinkers in this big country of ours, this wonderful country which is now ours, to the right thinkers will go the right keys. Apply. Signed, the Commissar. So I believe that George Orwell was wrong. Seriously, it's not going to be the way Orwell said it was. It's not going to even be the way Huxley said it was. Oh, this could be happening right now. You better call your office this very minute. You had better call your office this very minute, because I am locked out. I have no commercials. I have nothing. I stand before you, a man not only shorn of his commercials and his nose flute, but shorn of his dignity too. And all I can say is to my fellow Americans, for crying out loud, why didn't we think of this? Well, I guess in a way we had it coming to us. I mean, in a sense, we did. We abdicated all along the line, each one of us. I mean, I'll admit, I never realized the value. Yeah, I can just see. Do you realize that I'm locked out of the men's room? Huh. You know what this can result in. I don't have to go any further with that. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people just wait and see Monday. Don't be out there laughing. Don't laugh at all. Because the time is going to come, say about 3 o'clock Monday afternoon, you're going to remember where you heard it first. Not on Winchell's program or on Barry Gray. Edward R. Murrow didn't even note that it was happening. So concerned was he over the Middle Eastern crisis. Right here in our very midst. Well, I think we had it coming. I mean, I'm walking. I mean, the signs are there. The signs are there, really. They've been all around us for centuries. This morning, I'm walking along, and I'm on 7th Avenue, and I'm about maybe at 52nd, 53rd Street, something like that, on 7th Avenue. And there is a typical American family group milling around. They have come in from Millfield, New Jersey, or Milling Pond, Connecticut. And they have arrived, and they are sort of standing on the corner there, and there's a short, stout father type, a real father. This guy was born with a salt and pepper mustache. His mother had a difficult time. He was born with a salt and pepper mustache. He's standing there, and he's kind of milling. He's pear-shaped, and his wife is a sort of pear-shaped wife. And they're milling, and they had this look on the face of, well, where shall we go now? What are we going to do? We are in the big city now. This is what we've come for. Now where to? Will it be the Roxy to see the Rockettes? Shall we go down to Rockefeller Center and just watch the flags flop? Or shall we, this thing? Well, here we are, now what? And they're standing around, and mother's looking west and he's looking east, and there are two gawky, gangling kids of the modern progressive school type kids. You can always tell the way the girl brushes her hair and the kind of blazer that the kid wears. They're much better dressed than the parents. All the dough has been invested in these two striplings. And the two of them are standing there. and I heard this. I'm going to tell you exactly what I heard. Father has said, obviously, what he wants to do. Mother has countermanded what he wants to do. She has something else. They're both standing there. And this tall, brushed girl, who already, at the age of 13, has a little set of letters above her head that say betrothed. You can just see her looking right out of the Herald Trib Society page. And she says to mother and father with a commanding voice, that's the sad part of it. She says, let's have a discussion. Let's have a discussion. This is a democratic discussion. You see, this is the ideal of all the Spocks, all the parent magazines, 17, Zip, Pip, Quick, all the rest of them, that whenever things are going wrong, have a discussion. Rely on the judgment of these idiotic 13-year-olders. And in the end, give in to them, you see, through a long series of illogical arguments. And so I'm walking there, and this chick, this 13-year-older, says, let's have a discussion. And poor father, I could see he just sort of wilted a little bit, and mother wilted a little bit, and I knew what the discussion was going to result in. It's no wonder we've lost our keys. It is no wonder we have lost the combination to the lock. and I go, about 10 minutes before that, I'm walking past Carnegie Hall. And here is a real Schraft lady standing out. This is, by the way, the gathering place for Schraft ladies on Saturday afternoons and Saturday nights. And they're all standing out there. And there's one wearing, the kind of fur wrap, the little fur wrap that looks like a kind of a brownish fur wrap that kind of goes halfway around the shoulders and hangs down to about the shoulder blades. This little kind of, what do they call those things? These are old lady type. Is that a stole? Well, she's got this thing around her, and she's wearing this little pot turned upside down on her head. A real Schrafty hat. And she's standing there, and this is exactly what happened. I'm going to outline to you why we have lost our keys. We have lost the combination. And I'm walking past her, paying absolutely no attention to this old gal, and she's paying no attention to me, and all of a sudden she's, for heaven's sakes, for pity's sakes. And I turned, I thought she was saying something to me, and she tore out on the sidewalk and kind of went into an Immelman turn, a slow looping turn, made a turn to the right, and there another one who looked exactly like her came darting out of a doorway, and they both clasped each other. She says, "Emily, for pity's sakes, I've been waiting for a dog's age. Where have you been?" And Emily said, "Right here in the doorway, Clara." And they were both clinging to each other, and I thought, oh, what a touching scene. And all of a sudden, Emily says, "Clara, for crying out loud, let's grab a hot dog and get in line." And the two of them went into Nedick's right there next to Carnegie. Let's grab a hot dog. It's no wonder we've lost our keys. Speaking of the lost, this is WOR, AM and FM, New York. Friendly, reliable, sober, industrious, and vaguely confused.
Now let's beat out a message via TomTom.
Isolate light, isolate light. Precisely right, precisely right. Crisp free pressure. Valentine beer.
To be crisp, a beer must be isolate light. With the flavor, precisely right. Loudly golden, crystally clear, the crisp free pressure. Valentine beer.
Hey, get your cold beer. Hey, get your Valentine.
Boy, that was pretty good, wasn't it? All right, George, we ought to be locked out all our lives. Actually, I think that, it's a funny thing. I'd like to make a point here. Now, don't be too frightened. It is quite possible you are locked out. Now, you have all of Saturday afternoon, you have all of Sunday morning and Sunday evening to contemplate it. Now, there's another side to this thing. It isn't as bad as it seems. In fact, it is much better than it seems. I have a suspicion that the best thing that could happen to 90% of the males in this country would be to be locked out. I mean, I'm serious about that. I mean, I know a whole lot of guys who, if they were relieved of the responsibility of telling the boss what to do with his key, if they were relieved of the responsibility of quitting, they would sneak back home on the 532 with this fantastic sense of relief. And of course, they would be weeping and pretending that it was a terrible thing. And they would arrive home and they would go through all the motions. And then by Tuesday morning, they would awake and they'd notice that sun's shining out there, and they'd hear a few of the birds whistling. And they would not even, it's a surprising thing how many of us go through our lives bound and shackled and held down by enormous chains, which we think, of course, are terribly important and necessary to our existence, which, as in the matter of fact, are really the one agent that is preventing us from existing, from being really true and real, from being what we want to be. And I can see, I would like to know, I'd just like to know how many guys are sitting out there listening to this now, And their wives, of course, think this is a ridiculous thing. What do you mean, Charles would... Why, it would be terrible if Charles was locked out of the agency. I just wonder how many guys have this sneaking thing deep inside of them who are saying, oh, boy, oh, would that be great? Oh, come on, admit it, you know? It would be great. Because a lot of things would happen. First of all, I think one of the things that has begun to worry many people in this country is the constantly advancing effeminization of the male. It's really not as simple as that. That the advancing masculization of the female has, in so creating a new atmosphere, has in a sense removed some of the masculinity from the male. In short, a male is only masculine when compared to a female and her degree of femininity. It's not that the women have lost femaleness, they have lost femininity. It's not that the males have lost maleness, they have lost masculinity. And so, as you look around, you see all the stage shows, almost all of the movies today feature the new stars who have come up since about 1949 or 50 are all vaguely feminine. That is to say, they're not outwardly completely masculine, say in the Spencer Tracy mold of a previous era, you see, to total masculine, you know, or in the mold of, say, the Clark Gables, or a mold of the Victor McLaughlins of the past. I mean, this was a complete masculine man. And so gradually there has been a change, a slight coloring of it all, and I could just see this little man whose sole function in life has been to supply an endless stream of dollars for the, quote, activities of the family. The station wagons that are coming and going, and the kids that are going to this school and that school, the wife who's going to this club and that club, and the whole bit. His sole function has been to supply this endless stream. Funny thing the elevator operator said today, I'm coming in, and he said it right out of the blue. Funny, you know, Saturday mornings, I think, are very valuable times for consulting your navel. Really. Because honestly, a lot of the hoopla and a lot of the paper bag popping and a lot of the paper doll cutting out has ceased, you know, in these places. And you begin to see things for what they are. The file cabinets look gray and deserted and a little menacing and very faceless. They look okay, you know, when there's a lot of girls standing in front of them moving the drawers up and down. But boy, they look something else again when you see them with nobody. They just sit there waiting. And they contain all of our lives, all of ours, right there, packed away in alphabetical order, cross-indexed. And so I come in here, you know, and I'm very quietly standing in the elevator with my cup of lukewarm coffee. And the elevator operator suddenly turns to me and says, I don't know what it's about. I said, what? What? He said, I don't know. I figure some of these guys are going to come in here on Judgment Day. I said, what? What? And then I'm beginning to wait. Judgment Day. I hear the great bugles blowing and the gong, and I wonder how suddenly Judgment Day, and I'm waking out of my lethargy. I said, Judgment Day? What do you mean Judgment Day? He says, well, I'll tell you. He says, you know, there are some guys, I've been riding this elevator now for 20 years. There are some guys who come into this office 7 days a week into this building. They come in at 7 o'clock in the morning. They don't leave until 10 o'clock at night. And they do this they've been doing it now for 20 years. I don't know how long they were doing it before I came here and how long they're going to do it after I leave. They're going to come in on Judgment Day. Wonder what these guys get out of life. And I had no answer. Absolutely no answer. And then I began to think, you know, I get off the elevator and I walk back with my key held hopefully in my hand. And I try it in the door and I'm locked out. And I'm struggling around. There's the first moment of panic, and then there's the great moment of relief. And I turn around, I'm walking away from the door, okay, and it suddenly occurred to me that these guys, that most of these guys who spend their lives going up and down elevators and shuffling papers back and forth are running as hard as they can, just as wildly and as hard as they can from something else. They're not running to something, they're running away from something. And they're running away from this involvement with mankind and with the human being, with the family, with the people. Because you're not involved with people at all when you're involved with file cabinets and papers and deals. That's totally abstract. And I'm going up the stairway then. I try the men's room. I'm locked out. I'm wandering around there, and I'm disenfranchised. And I said, well, you know, maybe Maybe the bugles are getting ready to blow. Who knows? And I suspect in some ways that they might be. Like today, I'm walking. These are all things that happened to me today. Exactly, all in one line, just lined right up. I'm walking along. I know. Or maybe I passed one block after I heard Emily talking to Clara, and I'm in the next block and I'm waiting for a light, and a cab pulls up, and I'm suddenly reminded of an incident that occurred to me 4 or 5, maybe 3 or 6 or 9 days ago. Are you a collector of cab companies' names? You know, don't fall into the idea that all cabs are just cabs. And don't begin to believe that they're all named either Yellow or Checker. They are not. That there are thousands of cabs in this right here in this city that have a little red series of block letters on the back doors that tell the name of the cab company. Now, how this works is that if you're a cab company owner and say you own 100 cabs, well, for tax purposes, what these guys do is split their company up into about 30 different little companies, and each company owns 3 cabs, you see. It's kind of a corporation tax deal, and actually it's one big company, but there are 30 little corporations, and each one has to have a name that has to be put on the outside of the cab. And so they come up with some great names. I'm telling you, some of the greatest names. For example, there is the Money Cab Company. I mean, how's that for a guy getting right down to the basic of it all? I saw this when by George, there's the Money Cab Company. And one day I get in the cab and it says Friendly Cab Company. And I get in and there's this little gnarled cab driver sitting up there in the front seat. And he's and you know, this kind of guy who has a constant stream, an untapped stream of obscenity, just running right through him like a fountain, and it bubbles out of his ears and out of his eyes and out of his and there's hate, little lines of hate extending from him, and it's as though he has thorns growing out all over him, and there are little filaments reaching out that have poisonous tentacles on the and I arrive at the end of my trip. I hand the guy his tip. Here I've gone, you know, it's getting to the point now. You know all those little cab driver tricks. For example, giving you your change in all dimes. The reason this is done, of course, so that you can't give 15-cent tips. So if you get a 40-cent cab ride, he'll give you your change in all dimes. You can't give him a dime tip. You wind up giving him a 50% tip, 20 cents for a block. And so he tries this routine, and I reach in my pocket, and I got a nickel. So here we've gone this little way. We've gone about 4 blocks or something like that, and I give him 15 cents, which is a standard tip for this little... He looks at me like that, and he slams the door, and there goes the Friendly Cab Company off in the distance. Then there was another great moment that happened to me. I get in a cab on Madison Avenue the other day, and it's one of those terrible moments when we turn left, we get into a crosstown street, and every truck, every bicycle, every motor scooter, 14,000 cabs, 95 policemen, 7 fire trucks, everything is converged on us. We are completely trapped. And I am sitting there, and all I can hear is the sound of muffled curses around me and the tick of the meter. My lifeblood is dripping out of me on the floor. Like that, you see. I'm sitting there for about 40 minutes, it seemed, and the smoke is rising and the steam, and it's hot. It's really hot already there, It's hot. You can see the city. It might as well be in mid-August, steaming. And finally, it's for crying out loud. And I get out of the cab, and by now I run up a bill of $1. So I give the guy $1.25, and I slam the door, and I look at and there it is, the name on the door, and I'm telling you, this happened to me. Listen to this. The Hopeless Cab Company.
That was the Gene Shepherd Show. Beachcomber, by the way, was a radio program that aired from March 1989 to December 1994. There were 18 half-hour episodes, and it was broadcast on BBC Radio 4 and was later rerun on BBC Radio 7. It starred Richard Ingrams, John Wells, Patricia Routledge, John Sessions, and Brian Perkins. The program was based on the long-running humorous column By the Way in the Daily Express, written by J.B. Morton, under the pseudonym Beachcomber. This is episode 1, which is originally broadcasted on March 18th, 1989.
We present Beachcomber by the Way, selections from the humour of J.B. Morton, with Richard Ingrams as the author,
Greetings, my public.
interruptions from John Wells as Prodnose,
What is all this?
Be gone, you oaf.
and Patricia Routledge and John Sessions as several red-bearded dwarfs, amongst others. Beachcomber by the Way.
Cram me with eels, I'm in a wayward mood today. At one moment the delightful muses make a circle round me, that they may lead me on towards Hemus and Helicon, on whose slopes songs grow thicker than wildflowers. Then at another moment I see a horse collar, and I am impelled to grin through it. The issue is in doubt.
What issue?
This one, you spavined fool. Once again I have seen written the absurd statement that a man should not laugh at his own jokes. If a man doesn't laugh at his own jokes, it means that he is self-conscious and timid and altogether half-strangled with beastliness.
Well, I don't laugh at mine.
My point exactly. I like to see a man begin to laugh even before he has told his joke.
Oh, dear. Let's hear it, then.
Zinc up 3 points, Nigerian crew down 2, consolidated holding steady.
Sir James,
Yes, Valerie, what is it?
sorry to bother you, but your wife has fallen. What should I do?
Sell immediately, you stupid girl.
Sell what? I don't get it. Here, why don't you give us a song?
Of what kind?
Well, I know you. Something not too stupid. Something with a dash of philosophy in it.
All right.
Life has its problems for us all. Our dreams must go beyond recall. The future's chill and black. The girl I loved was so cross-eyed that every single time she cried, the tears ran down her back.
Who on earth wrote that?
George Eliot, I think. Or could it have been Mr. Ruskin?
It sounds like a cabaret
Oh,
thing.
no, I assure you, it is classical.
One never knows when you are being serious.
Apparently one doesn't, you great bat-eared gawk. Be off, pest.
Thanks to Mrs. Screaming for such an interesting piano recital. And now, ladies, Mr. Big White Carstairs will present an illustrated talk entitled Quaint Manners and Customs in Ahaha Land.
Ladies, tonight I will enlighten you all in the ways of the Ahahas.
Bless you.
No, sir, you must understand that is their name. First slide, please. The Ahahas are a little-known African tribe, so little known, in fact, that till now they have featured in only 17 Dark Continent motion pictures and 5 issues of the National Geographic. The Ahahas are great hunters.
I can't see the fox.
Understandably, madam, they don't hunt foxes. The Ahahas hunt rhinoceroses.
They aren't civilized like us.
Their shields, boots, hats, and all cooking utensils are made of rhino hide. When a herd of rhinoceros is in the neighbourhood of a village, the hunters dig a great pit, concealing it with branches near to a waterhole, and then when the beasts come down to drink at night, the hunters creep up and frighten them away. This is why so few of them have boots, hats, shields, or cooking utensils.
Who is in charge of these fuzzy wuzzies?
The head man of the village. He sits all day on a heap of rhinoceros hides in the door of his kraal, drinking himself stupid, or rather stupider, with a sort of poison made from uji berries. His many wives press this on him whenever he momentarily regains his senses.
His wives, you say?
Yes. His chief wife is the most important woman in the village. She's allowed to sit all day at the back of the kraal on a heap of baked mud. Quite an honour, as you can see. Numerous rings of wood are pushed through her nose, and her forehead branded with a piece of flaming wood. This is why she sits at the back. No, that was a real cough. Sorry.
What do the men folk do all day?
Often they fight. The headsman's sons lead the tribe into battle, and if they bring anything back that's eatable, he eats it in honour of their victory, and anything uneatable as well.
So what happens in these battles then, Mr. Carstairs?
Well, when they go out to fight, they wear their peaked caps back to front, so that the enemy will think they are retreating. But as they usually are retreating, this makes it look as if they are in fact attacking, which tends to ruin the whole point of the thing. In battle, the Ahas stamp on their shields to make a terrifying noise. While they are doing this, the enemy's spears usually find their bodies unprotected.
What about stampeding elephants?
Good question. When a stampede is expected, the Ahas make lots of elephants out of mud and drop them all round the villages, as you can see here. The theory being that real elephants stampeding will stop to fraternize with what they take to be their fellow elephants. Sadly, it has never happened yet, as this slide shows.
So, what does the future hold for the Ahas?
Next slide, please.
There isn't one.
Which, I think, answers the question perfectly.
Mr. Big White Carstairs, ladies. Any further questions? Yeah, how did he get to be called Big?
I have seen advertised in the paper a concert soon to be held at the Boeotian Hall, in which the principal soloist will be a singing mouse. I once knew a mouse that played the violin, but to get it to pick up the tiny instrument you had to smear the strings with cheese. As often as not the mouse would eat the violin, cheese and all, and there the matter would rest until some fool had made another diminutive fiddle. The whole thing was sickeningly stupid, and as to what this concert will be like, one can only conjecture.
I knew a little tenor mouse who nightly filled the opera house. Although his voice was small in range, the higher notes were sweet and strange. One night a lady in the stalls, accustomed to low music halls, began to eat a hunk of cheese. The mouse went feeble at the knees, his whiskers twitched and stricken dumb. He eyed the auditorium, then in a rapture squeak he cried, "After the show, my dear, outside!"
There is obviously a certain amount of cruelty involved in teaching mice to play musical instruments. I remember a Miss Weatherwell who used to lift a mouse up to the spout of a trombone and make it blow hard by compressing its cheeks with bicycle clips. Of course, it could never blow hard enough to produce any sound, but what Mrs. Weatherwell liked was the idea of the thing. In bed at night she would rock with laughter when she thought of the huge instrument and the tiny creature. Years later, when she had sold the trombone to pay for a new cap for her nephew, she was passing a furniture shop. In the doorway sat her mouse, now very fat, blowing like fury into the trombone and producing a thin, silvery sound. She laughed so much that she fell over in the street and was arrested for obstruction.
What rubbish.
Yes, it's a moral tale. Hello? Hello? Ah, that's interesting.
Who is it?
That great scientist, Dr. Strabismus, whom God preserve of Utrecht. His latest remarkably appropriate invention is apparently being discussed on the radio this very moment.
What a strange coincidence.
No stranger than your face, weasel brain.
So, tell me, Dr. Strabismus, this psychological mousetrap of yours, how does it work?
Well, the mouse sees a bit of cheese and suspects a drop. But it is dummy cheese, and the mouse says to itself, nobody would set a drop with some cheese, because no mouse would risk its life for such a thing. Therefore, there is no drop.
I see. And then?
The mouse walks in, brushes aside the sham cheese, and bumps into a bit of real cheese. This must be the trap, says he, and at once retreats and saves himself.
Oh. Isn't this rather a clever mouse?
Yes, and they are always the hardest to catch. Outside, he finds all around him other traps, some baited with real and some with sham cheese, and he grows tired and nervous and tired.
Whereupon he enters the trap and is caught.
No. In his confusion, he finally takes a bite at a bit of sham cheese which has been smeared with poison. dead.
I see. Thank you, Dr. Strabismus, whom God preserve.
Of Utrecht.
Of Utrecht. And now over live to Leeds, where Mr. Samuel Glockers, a fish porter, has made a life-size model of a singing mouse out of a beetroot and placed it in a bottle. Come in, Mr. Glockers.
A psychological mousetrap. Not the most straightforward way of dealing with pests.
Allow me to demonstrate an alternative.
Home News. The hearing began today in the High Court of what is already being referred to as the case of the 12 red-bearded dwarfs. The defendant, a Mrs. Tasker, is accused of continually ringing the doorbell of a Mrs. Renton, and then, when the door is opened, pushing a dozen red-bearded dwarfs into the hall and leaving them there. One of the dwarfs, when questioned, said they knew nothing of the motive for this curious action, just that Mrs. Tasker paid them a shilling every time she pushed them into the hall. The case is being heard before Mr. Justice Cocklecarrot.
Mr. Snapdriver for the plaintiff, your witness, I think.
Thank you, my lord. Now, Mrs. Tasker, where were you on the afternoon of 26th of January, 1937?
I called at Mrs. Renton's house to leave a dozen red-bearded dwarfs with her.
Why had she ordered them? Silence! Silence! Mr. Hermitage, you represent Mrs. Tasker?
Yes, my lord, and she would like to submit this list of people whom she wishes to call as witnesses.
Good heavens, there's over 7,000 names here. Surely they can't all be connected with the case. For instance, I see here the name of a cabinet minister.
I understand, my lord, that some of these dwarfs claim to be related to the cabinet minister.
Good gracious. And I see that distinguished sailor, Rear Admiral Sir Ewart Hodgson.
I understand he knows one of the dwarfs.
Mr. Snapdriver, what have you to say to this?
The prosecution, my lord, has a far larger list of some 12,000 witnesses.
It's a bluff, my lord. He hasn't got 12,000 witnesses.
Here is the list, my lord.
Oh, dear. I see it includes 2 cabinet ministers and an entire football team. I suppose that they, too, are...
related to the dwarfs? So I understand, my lord.
Who on earth are these little red-bearded gentry?
I think Admiral Sir Ewart Hodgson might tell us that.
Now, Sir Ewart, will you, as a distinguished sailor, be good enough to tell the court what you know of these dwarfs?
By the might of the Navy, our empire was built up. By the might of the Navy, it must be protected. Britannia did not rise from out the azure main merely to sink back into it again. The salt is in our blood, and...
Sir Ewart, what has this to do with the case?
My lord, the future of our Navy is the concern of us all.
I shall have to clear the court if this goes on.
My lord?
Mr. Hermitage.
I beg leave to enter a residuum, my lord, with juggins.
Don't talk rubbish, there's no such thing.
All right, sir, my lord.
I have no option but to adjourn the court. Reconvene on the 27th.
The continuing case of the 12 red-bearded dwarfs threw up new sensations today with the hearing of evidence from the plaintiff, Mrs. Renton. Describing her first sighting of the dwarfs in her hallway, she said that her initial instinct was to laugh, seeing each little gentleman standing there, fingering his hat nervously. After lunch, Rear Admiral Sir Ewart Hodgson was called again by mistake, and immediately made an impassioned plea for the Navy to provide shorter hammocks for small sailors. He was then removed. Further uproar was occasioned when a woman in the audience stood up and pointed, screaming, at one of the dwarfs.
It's my Ludwig! My own little son! Ludwig, don't you know your mother?
Well, do you or don't you?
My name is Bob, and I am an orphan. I was left on the doorstep of a house in Eaton Square in a basket. A month later, both my parents died.
How do you know?
I read it in the paper.
What? How old were you?
31. It happened last year. I was mistaken for the laundry by the maids of the house, who had hysterics when I stepped out of the basket. So I went to Nuneaton to seek employment, and it was while working there for a haulage contractor that I met the lady who afterwards became my wife. And dearer, sweeter creature I have never...
All this has nothing whatever to do with the case.
Oh, it breaks my heart. I'll adopt the little dear.
Kindly remove that woman from the court and bring back Mrs. Tasker.
Mrs. Tasker, what was your motive?
I wanted to drive dwarfs into our hall.
But why? You will admit it is an unusual occupation.
Not for me. I've done it all my life.
You have driven dwarves into other ladies' houses?
Certainly.
Where do you get your supply of dwarfs?
From an agency. Fudlow and Trivett.
Extraordinary. Dr. Spunton, is there, to your knowledge, any disease which might account for Mrs. Tasker's strange habit?
There is. A rufo-nanitis. The symptoms are
Symptoms?
Yes, symptoms, but I always put a P before a Y. I can't help it.
This is preposterous. The case is adjourned until we can clear things up a bit.
But I've come all the way here from P-Oval.
More drama in the dwarves' case at the High Court today. Due to an error by the chief usher of the wardrobe, Mr. Justice Cockle-Carrot emerged from the robing room with his wig on back to front. Court was delayed for several hours. Later, one of the dwarves was cross-examined.
Your name is Howard Barthington?
It is no such thing. It is Stanislaus George Romney Barlow Orky Menders.
2 Barlows?
Why not?
You are a night watchman.
Why not?
Mr. Porchminder, will you please answer yes or no?
No.
Where were you on the night of the 10th of April?
No.
Retaining fees aside, would it not be better to speed up this case a bit?
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it is now time to consider this case on its merits.
And what, sir, would you say were its merits? We have not so far understood one word of the proceeding.
Nevertheless, certain facts stand out.
For instance?
I will not be cross-examined by my own jury. Now, these red-bearded dwarves... What's now?
Not red.
Let me see. You've dyed them yellow. A very foolish trick. Perilously near contempt of court.
Well, lad, surely the colour of these gentlemen's beards is not material to the case.
I will not be led off into another line of argument, Mr. Hermitage. I intend to make a supreme and almost despairing attempt to sum up this most curious case. If anybody has any questions to ask, let them be asked at once, so that I may be released from my next case, that of Hungarian Lighthouses Limited versus Mrs. Mara Kiki.
Well,
We
we
did that one too.
And how do you small gentry come to be involved?
We are Miss Myra Kiki. It is we who wrote the famous letter cancelling an order for 1,230 lighthouses.
Oh, no.
Last night, a freak fire believed to have been started by sunlight streaming through a judge's water bottle brought to an end the case of the 12 red-bearded dwarfs. Rumours that Mr. Justice Cockle-Carrot was himself manipulating the bottle at the time, before feeding the flames with his wig, have been strenuously denied. An eyewitness had this to say of the incident.
There can be no safeguard for the peace of Europe until our British-built warships lie keel to keel across every knot of the 7 seas. And until a British submarine is berthed in...
I wondered what had brought about the lull in hostilities. You are reading. I'm a bit of a bookworm myself.
Half of that description may be true.
What is this? The Anthology of Huntingdonshire Cabmen. Any good? Can't say I've seen it in the digest.
Any good? I quote, a masterpiece of imaginative literature. The cream of the more striking names, with initials, drawn from the first 3 momentous volumes of that masterwork, the lists of Huntingdonshire cabmen.
Let's have a taste, then.
If you insist. Wackfast, E.W. Fodge, S. Nerthers, P.L. Gimble, F.R. Senior. Quillworthy, B. Thrips, O.M.
But it's just names. No brief but revealing biographical details. No pictures.
None. Therein lies the romance, the intrigue, the true, the beautiful mystery.
But who knows what these cabmen might be getting up to?
Precisely. Who?
Alone on the lawn the cabman dances. In the dew of the dawn he kicks and prances. His bowler is set on his bullet head, for his boots are wet and his aunt is dead. There on the lawn as the light advances, on the tide of the dawn the cabman dances. Swift and strong as a garden roller, he dances along in his little bowler, skimming the lawn with royal grace, the dew of the dawn on his great red face. Two fairy flutes as the light advances, in square black boots the cabman dances.
hello, Vicar.
Goodness, it's young Owlscombe. Still unhappy with your lot?
Yes, Vicar. But I've decided what to do. I'm going to Canada to begin a new life, to seek fame and fortune.
Well done. My blessing on you, my son. Is there any way I can help?
You could lend me some money for the ticket.
All right. Here's £50. Good luck, my boy. Yes? Who is it?
Vicar? Vicar, don't you remember me? It's Owlscombe. You gave me 50 quid 39 years ago.
My goodness. So it is.
Yes. With that money, I bought a passage to Canada one way. Once there, I worked my way up from my job as a lowly timberman to become one of the grandest foresters in all that wide, rugged country. 16 timber mills, 23 lumber yards, and a troop of dancing grizzly bears at my beck and call. The sawdust sovereign of Saskatchewan.
And now you've come back to repay your debt. Splendid.
No, I was wondering if you'd make it another 50.
Aha! Now what new beastliness are you concocting?
I'll ignore that, you jabbermouth. Hark to this, a few entries from my soon-to-be ecstatically reviewed...
By whom?
By me, of course. You think I care a fig for anyone else's opinion? As I was saying, a few entries from my dictionary for today.
Let me hear the worst.
Adequate. Adjective applied by timid dramatic critics to the performance of an actor or actress whom they do not wish to offend. Amateur. One who plays games for the love of the thing. Unlike the professional, he receives no salary and is contented with presents of clothes, clubs, rackets, cigarettes, cups, checks, hotel expenses, fares, and so on.
Bosh.
Arctic conditions. A cold day in England. Authority. A writer who succeeds in getting the same article, with the wording slightly altered, published by several newspapers over and over again.
Oh, dear.
Autobiography. A book of gossip about other people. And...
As I expected, isn't it all rather cynical? And these are only the aids.
Here's a word beginning with B. Be gone, oaf.
Oh!
And now on to pleasanter things. That recurring spectacle, the annual attempt by Wagwell's Circus to lure back their star turn, La Belle Zabula, now the wife of the eminently respectable Colonel Wretch, is once again in full swing. Last week, Wretch Manor received a visit from the human snake, a Mr. Ernest Pablo, who began contorting himself around a side table during a discussion on colonial policy. And yesterday the Colonel was startled by the appearance of a lady with a massive black beard who beckoned him onto the lawn. By the afternoon it was all over the neighbourhood that Colonel Wretch had a bearded lady in his life. A heavy correspondence has ensued. Mrs. Wretch to Mr. Wagwell.
Dear Hildebrand, my circus life ended when I married Colonel Wretch. Your repeated efforts to persuade me to return, even temporarily, are an embarrassment to me in my social activities. One lady has got hold of a picture of me standing on your shoulders and enticing a large ape to drink from a beer bottle. Furthermore, if Anselmo the midget must pay a call, need he run barking between the vicar's legs? Don't ask me to make a comeback any more. La Belle Zabula must be but a memory. Yours sincerely, Utter Wretch.
From Mr. Wagwell to Colonel Wretch.
If the exquisite mountain who is now your missus will not come to her old pal Mohammed H. Wagwell, what about me coming to the mountain? What about you lending the grounds of Wretch Manor for a few performances? Nothing knocks the public like a dash of circusdom in a truly rural setting. I wait your reply before coming to pay a formal call. I may say I've asked Madame Goulash, she of the sweeping beard, to lay off you.
Colonel Wretch to Mr. Wagwell.
Dear Mr. Wagwell, you do not understand. The world in which my wife now moves is never brought into contact with people who do aerobatics on horses or intercept seals' food. She's called upon to meet people who do not know that such things go on, and when they are told of it, either close their eyes to it or write letters to the papers to get it stopped. Yours truly, Arthur Wretch.
From Mr. Wagwell to Colonel Wretch.
Sir,
While fully appreciating your hesitation in being asked to release your missus for her old equestrian act, I must point out that an honoured member of our troupe, Mimosa Mamie, Queen of the Tightrope, is in her more private capacity the wife of a respected chiropodist of Bury St Edmunds, who is also on the local Conservative Club catering committee. All we ask is that she should make 3 tours of the ring, standing with one leg on the back of Wandering Willie and the other on the back of Bangor Bucks, ending with a leap into the arms of the clown Romulus, who squirts her with soda water and kisses her cheek loudly. Yours obediently, Hildebrand Wagwell.
Colonel Wretch to Mr. Wagwell.
Dear Mr. Wagwell, does it not occur to you that, for the kind of thing you have in mind, my wife is rather out of practice? I must also ask you not to send emissaries to my home. Yesterday, as I was discussing a local matter with our vicar, a pygmy came up the avenue on a huge tricycle. He announced in a loud voice that he was the whirling midget, Anselmo Amantinelli, and he crawled between the vicar's legs and barked. Forgive me for not finding this very edifying. Yours truly, Arthur Wretch.
From Halma the Wizard to Colonel Wretch.
Sir, perhaps you would let your old woman officiate as the girl who whisked a yellow handkerchief off the goldfish bowl when I shoot at the footlights. She could wear a startling costume and cry "Hop" in a musical contralto when I throw her my mortarboard. My act is altogether more refined than most of the others in our show, and I'm sure you would not consider it beneath your old bag of mischief's dignity to assist me, especially as I once had the honour of being in the same human pyramid with her in the set piece at Gosport. In close photo, she is the lady whose left foot reposes on my forehead. Yours to a T, Fred Halma.
The Wretch Controversy. From Puffleton, Nubby and Puffleton to Mr. Hildebrand Wagwell.
The attention of our client, Colonel Wretch, having been drawn to Hercules the Mighty, who entered Wretch Manor and tore through 2 telephone directories and a pack of playing cards on the afternoon of April the 4th, and did then proceed to bite through a chandelier with his naked teeth, crying, "How's that for fitness?" Our client has instructed us to ask you how much you will take to call off the said performer, together with the 6 lobelias, the Snake Man, Romulus the Clown, a bearded lady known as Rita, a pygmy tricyclist, Helmer the Wizard, Nibby, Mibby, Vadko, Gertie the Hussar, and other members of your troupe.
Mr. Wagwell to Puffleton, etc.
You may tell your client to keep his dough. He can't crawl out of the matter like that. And if one of you nubneys is the nubney that got me refused damages when our Red Indian chieftain Chagawagga broke his nose on a lamp standard in Cogswade High Street on the night of the fire, then all I can say is I want no nubney and no Puffleton either shoving his finger into my pie. Your so-called client can't intimidate me by throwing me to a lot of wild beasts in wigs.
My lad, the Rich versus Wagwell case?
Ah, yes, at last a seemingly straightforward piece of jurisprudence. Call the first witness.
Call the 12 red-bearded dwarfs.
Oh, the 12 red-bearded dwarfs! Oh, the 12 red-bearded dwarfs!
Mr. Snapdriver, what on earth do these dwarfs have to do with this case?
Everything, my lad, as you shall see.
I doubt it. Well, that's enough for now.
Aren't you going to give us a happy ending?
An excellent idea, Prodners. Goodbye.
Oh!
That was Beachcomber, by the way. Adapted for radio by Michael Barfield, with Richard Ingrams, who appeared as Beachcomber. Patricia Routledge, John Sessions, and John Wells played the other characters. Your announcer was Perkins, and the producer was Thompson.
Well, that's it with the first hour of the 6th episode of Airchecks. Stay tuned in the next hour when Eric Idle goes on the radio.